want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandflix here, back with a new Eternal Return video. For today's video, I want to go over 5 characters that you should learn if you have an easier time climbing the ranked ladder in Season 5, or maybe you want to play with your friends and be a bit more successful. If you don't have a character choice, let's say that you don't have a character you like a lot and want a one-trick, I think these 5 characters should be good for learning the particular class that they fulfill, and they should teach you skills that are somewhat transferable to anyone else you want to play in the future. These characters are hopefully not super overpowered, because if they are really overpowered, they will be nerfed, and this means that they shouldn't be nerfed too hard if they are nerfed, or they shouldn't be nerfed at all if you're watching this video in a few weeks or even a few months down the line. So in this video, I'll be covering why I think these characters are good. I'll bring up their initial route and how to best efficiently route it. I'll bring up their power spikes and how you want to play around those power spikes, as well as the items that you want to buy in which order. And also, I want to do a brief mention on how you best want to approach fights, whether it's playing against them or playing with them, in case you don't care about these characters, you just want to see how to play against them, and you're here for that reason alone. For our first character, I want to talk about Markus, a big man who wields an axe or hammer. The axe route is more common, but I enjoy hammer because it looks really funny to hit people with it, so you're going to see a lot of hammer gameplay in the background after we talk about his route. The reason why I think Markus is really good is because he naturally builds very beefy due to his generous HP scalings, and he's able to really determine how fights go if you use your spells well. Now, he has some weird interactions between his spells, which means that you do have to use your brain before you hit every button, because you might accidentally grief your team, and I think it's a positive just because it lets you kind of think about how you're going to approach fights while you're fighting, instead of just brainlessly going in and smashing every button you can. So for his axe route, I'm going to pick a random KR route that I found that seemed pretty good. You're going to be starting in school, and you're going to want to take your E, and you're going to want to get to the Hyperloop as quickly as possible. Because of that, you actually don't want to kill the chickens if you manage to get the school Hyperloop. You're going to ignore any mobs you see after you pick up everything and immediately teleport into Hotel. In Hotel, you only need 2 items, so you want to get those items ASAP and then get it straight to the Hyperloop and get into Beach. Now, in Beach, if you're lucky, no one will have killed the chickens that are by the beach teleport, but if they are taken, it's not a big deal. You want to position yourself for the wolves that are either close by in Hotel or on the lower part of Beach itself. And while you're doing that, you want to make sure that you have the time to cook your bread and maybe some SP drinks if you run up if you're concerned about having stamina problems later on. And then by the time you're done doing all that, you should be on top of the wolves by the time they spawn, unless your build hasn't really contested. Now, the beautiful part of this Hotel wolf pack being moved, or rather being added to where it is that it's very, very close to the other beach wolf spawn. So depending on where you are when you finish your build, you can immediately run to the other side and then grab that wolf pack as well. And then once you're done with that, you can just go to the Hyperloop and then group with your team, or continue farming wolves that you think should exist. The best part about Markus is that he doesn't really have a power spike. He is very good at scaling with items and levels, but he doesn't have a particular threshold that he needs to meet in order to be the most effective. Basically, the moment your ult is available, and as long as it's up, you are very threatening, because your ultimate lets you catch people out, it lets you slow people, it lets you start a fight, it lets you escape. It does everything you want it to do, and there's no real button, like you don't have to hit level 5 on Q or level 5 on E. You can just immediately run at people the moment you hit that ultimate, because you now threaten them a lot. Obviously, your items matter a lot for raw stats, but you aren't playing around something, you're able to go aggressive the moment you want to go aggressive. So as I mentioned earlier, Markus is a character that really likes scaling off of HP. So because of that, every upgrade you get is going to be an HP upgrade item. So unfortunately, the thing with playing Markus is that you technically fall into the tank class role. This means that while you can take a lot of the free upgrades you get from either objective spawns or random drops from wolves, it is technically suboptimal to take those for yourself, and you should be giving it to your teammates rather, in order to scale them up faster. The sole exception to this is going to be the very first item you purchase, just so you can keep up with the power level for the rest of the game. Now, these purchases will either be these 3 items, and I think one of them is better than the others, but I know that this one is going to be the one that's most common. And this one is going to be Battlesuit. Battlesuit is a meteorite upgrade that is going to give you a lot of HP, a lot of CDR, a lot of armor, and the reflection passive. The reflection passive is pretty good because it gives you a pretty good AoE when you take a lot of damage, as well as giving you heal cut if people decide to try and focus you with auto attacks. Now, the reason why I don't like it this much is because Markus does have a problem with being bursted, so my personal preference is going for Battlesuit and finding cooldown reduction in a different item somewhere else. Now, the only reason why I can get away with Battlesuit easily is because I'm playing Hammer. I don't think Axe has the same benefits as Hammer does when it comes to weapon types, but Axe is better because the weapon skill is theoretically better, and also the Axe upgrade, Axe of Pengu, I think, comes with HP, which again scales really well with Marcus's skills. So with that in mind, you're going to want to get a Mithril at some point, which thankfully is less common for build paths on ADCs and mages, and you're going to want to slam that upgrade as soon as possible. For Hammer, you're going to want to get that Tree of Life instead, which unfortunately is a lot more contested, but a lot more accessible, so maybe you'll get it that way instead. Now, a lot of Marcus's items are going to be based on the Force Core. If you're building the Hammer build that I like with the Guardian Suit, that means your upper limit for Force Cores is going to be 3, which is a lot of Force Cores. Even for Axe, you're going to want 2, which is a lot of Force Cores. This means that the Force Core item you choose is going to be really important because you're likely only going to get that one, and that one will almost always be Solar System Miniature. Boots of Hermes is really strong. It gives you a lot of tenacity and it gives you a lot of movement speed. But Solar System Miniature gives you a massive HP shield that most characters cannot deal with unless their name is Isaac or Luke, because those characters come with shield breaks for some reason. And the way that the Solar System Miniature shield works is that you get almost your entire built HP bar as a shield, and then that prevents you from dying almost instantly or forces your opponents to run after you and take you down or let time out, in which case you're either running away or continue to deal damage. So again, the summarized order is going to be your chest piece, which is going to be Guardian Suit or Battle Suit, and then you're going to want to get your weapon, whether it's Axe of Pangu or Squeaky Hammer, or rather Axe of Pangu. And then you want to gonna fill out your Force Core item, which is always going to be Sources of Miniature, and then the Mithril Helmet slash I think it's called Visor, Tactical Visor. You're gonna get when the Mithril or Tree of Life is freed up, and then your very final Boots of Hermes will either be purchased for you or you're gonna find it as a drop or an excess item. So as I've been mentioning a lot, Marcus is a tank. That means as a tank, you're gonna be in charge of either soaking damage, pulling pressure and aggro, or even just forcing a fight. And the issue with Marcus is that unlike traditional tanks in this game that all have a button that gives them a lot of damage resistance or damage reduction, Marcus has none of that. Marcus just has a lot of damage and a lot of crowd control. So that means you can't really run in without having proper follow-up or proper crowd control and lockdown, because if you let your enemy team, or rather if you let the enemy team just kind of smack you away, you will die very fast. This means you will either want to get all 3 of your opponents into one throwback, or you want to make sure that the enemy damage dealer that poses the most threat to you is constantly threatened by your CC or isolated with you, so you can make sure it's a 1v1. The more damage you take out once, the less likely your fight is going to go well, because Marcus, while he does have good sustain, he doesn't have good burst healing. The reason why Soul System Miniature and Force Field are so popular on Marcus is because they give you those burst shielding options, but you have nothing in your kit that lets you kind of cheat your way out of a bad fight if it comes down to it. So when you play Marcus, make sure you see a good engage, make sure you find the enemy damage dealer and control them and pressure them, or else you might die really quickly. Now, another thing on Marcus you want to be careful of is how you order your skills. For example, if you use your E on an enemy squishy or someone running away, you're going to knock them away, and this can actually prevent your allies from catching up to them because you've now pushed that enemy further away from them. And while you can follow it up with W, if your opponent is immediately walking backwards or uses a movement ability immediately after your E, they will always escape your W, so you can't even EW properly. So ironically, that means if you're just trying to run at somebody, you always just want to walk at them instead of using E, unless you intentionally miss your E to go next to them instead, which obviously works as well. Now, as well as talking about his ultimate, you want to make sure that you're careful with your ultimate and your W combination. If you flip an enemy tank or an enemy assassin or enemy bruiser into your backline and they aren't prepared for it, you might lose the fight instantly. If you use your ultimate, you want to make sure that your ultimate is used on enemy squishies, and you want to make sure that if the enemy squishies are hit by your ultimate, they don't immediately blink away and then you accidentally throw, again, the enemy bruiser into your backline, because your ultimate into W is not a true combo. There's a lot of time for the enemy team to blink out or dash out. So because of that, a lot of what happens is that in neutral, Marcus will throw raw Ws out, which can be problematic because if your W is down, that means the enemy squishies won't have the threat of you flipping them back, which means that if you ult them, they'll be slowed a lot, which is still a very good fight initiation, but you won't have the threat of flipping them backwards. So I want to make sure you know exactly when you're allowed to use your W to harass the enemy front line, or if you want to save it for a dive onto the back line. So hopefully that makes sense. we can move on from Markus now. So for our next character, I want to talk about Jenny. Jenny is going to be a technically AMP ADC. She does a lot of damage through her passive and the Tellurian slash Sports Watch item passive, and so you'll find yourself autoing a lot when you play her. Now, the reason why Jenny is going to be recommended over all the other AD carries is because she comes with a death immune passive. Now, this passive isn't the hardest to play around from the enemy side. You can just camera it or recon it and track her down, but it's still a lot of time that the enemy has to take to kill her if there is still a team around her. This means that she is technically safer than a lot of AD carries, especially since she has a ultimate that covers a lot of ground and CCs people that are still stuck in it when it pops off, and she has a carpet that can knock people away or towards her, which gives her a lot of control over fights because she has so many options during them. She is a bit shorter range, so she doesn't have insane safety, but in exchange for that shorter range, she comes with a lot more options of CC during the fight. So for Jenny's route, I'm going to recommend this Beach Hotel Fire Station route. I personally don't like starting beach very often because beach is such a large zone, and if you spawn on the wrong side of beach, going to hotel can be really problematic. So if you find yourself spawning on the side of beach that loops closer to uptown, what you're gonna do is walk into uptown and hyperloop from uptown into hotel. Now if you get the better spawns on beach, the ones that are closer to hotel, don't worry about the hyperloop, just run into hotel, go and get the cubby that's right next to the fountain and loot those for your zone, and then run straight to the hyperloop. If you hit level 2, you can technically carpet or queue the chickens there if they are still there, and it should still be time efficient. I think you might need to auto them once or twice, which will waste some time, but those chickens are convenient for you if you've crafted a bit, so you might as well take them. And then in Fire Station is you're going to finish your build. Fire Station is pretty close to the campfire next to police station, so you can finish everything, cook there, and potentially even run back to kill the wolf camp that's by the hyperloop in school. And once you're done killing that wolf camp, you can look for people to grief before or after the wolf camp spawns, or just hyperloop to your team to start grouping up and killing other people on the map or just farming mobs. So what is Jenny's power spike? Jenny's power spike, much like Magnus, is going to be when your build is complete, but also her bigger power spike is going to be when you get your first force core item, which should be Holy Orders. The reason why this Holy Orders power spike is so efficient is because it gives you a flat addition to your skill and percentage scaling. So if you ever play League of Legends, just imagine Rabadon's death cap, and while this Rabadon death cap is slightly less effective because it's adding on to your base scaling from your weapon mastery, it is still a very big boost in the early game, and you'll find yourself doing a lot less damage than you want to until you get it. So the way to best guarantee this Holy Orders power spike is to farm everything you see, and to make sure that if your team is looking for early griefs, that you're there to finish early griefing off, so you can get as many credits as you can before that battle zone or alpha spawn on night 2. Now, you might look at the sports watch and wonder if you want to ever upgrade that to Trillion Timepiece for a quote-unquote better power spike. Don't worry about it too much because the jump between Trillion Timepiece and sports watch isn't as big as you might think. You're holding on to sports watch because of the item effect, and that item effect increase from sports watch to Trillion Timepiece is going to be only a 3% increase, which means that it's a lot less effective than you might expect. Now, speaking of Trillion Timepiece, Sports Watch, and Holy Orders, you're going to want to get Holy Orders first as an item. Every item you get is going to be probably an attack speed and amp item. So again, first off, Holy Orders, best amp spike in the game. And then you're going to be looking at either the upgraded helmet, which I think is the motorcycle helmet or racing helmet. You're going to want to look at your weapon afterward. Now, the weapon you're going to take is not going to be Devil's Marksman for obvious reasons, because the other pistol that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, that pistol has way more bullets, which means that you can shoot for a lot more before you have to reload. Your boots are going to be most likely, I think they're called blade boots, but obviously if you get red shoes, then it's even better because red shoes are just a very, very efficient form of blade boots. Now, you can also go plated steel caps, or is that what it's called? That's a League of Legends item. You can also go legs of steel if you really want to, but the thing with legs of steel is that it doesn't come with attack speed. And then for the very last item, you're going to want Trillion Timepiece, because again, the spike's very, very small, so you can prioritize it at the very, very end. And you really don't want to drop off this Trillion Timepiece because again, it adds so much damage to every auto you deal. If you look at the damage scaling from Trillion Timepiece versus the damage of your E, you'll notice that while it is less than the actual proc of E itself, you're getting a lot more damage over time, and you're not as reliant on your E to be up or even comboing off of it properly to get damage on enemy characters. So while some people might recommend going Blood Ripper or other amp items, I think that's not really an option unless you're a true master of Jenny and you know exactly how to combo with your skills to not need the sports wash slash Tillian timepiece item passive. So, with that said, the way you want to fight as Jenny is you're gonna want to try and look for a dive onto the enemy damage dealers. Now, obviously, you can't go too crazy, but the thing is that you have a death immune passive, and most of the time the enemy squishies do not. So when you dive the death or when you dive the enemy squishies, you can often chunk them or even kill them, and then you'll be killed yourself. But since you're Jenny, you dropped a massive field that charms your opponent. You've used your carpet to CC them, and even if you get taken down after all of that, you then go immune and you can crawl back to your teammates, or your teammates can cover for you and then make sure you're alive even after you've died. And even if you do go down again after having your passive procced, you that probably means your fight either went horrifically, so you weren't winning anyways, or the fact that your enemy team took so much time in killing your re-alive body means that they probably aren't going to win the rest of the fight. Now, this does mean you are very, very, very reliant on your passive being up for this playstyle. If your passive is not available, either ask your team to avoid fighting or simply just play very safely. So you can kind of kill enemy tanks really quickly, but most of your damage is best used on squishies. So either float on the outside, charge your E to full, and then immediately jump the enemy squishy with a fully charged E into an E into an RE, and hopefully that kills that person straight out. Or you want to float around and just kind of dive when it's convenient to dive and pop the enemy carry that way. Hopefully that makes sense. You can move on to the next character. So for a third character, I want to talk about Tank Luke. Now the reason why I want to very explicitly point out Tank Luke, not Bruiser Luke, not Pen Luke, is because I think Tank Luke is a lot stronger for a person who is not as good with him mechanically, and even someone who's playing him in lower elo where people are more traumatized by Pen Luke, which works to Tank Luke's favor because you are way beefier. They'll use cooldowns they expect to kill you normally, and then it won't happen. And then because they don't full commit to killing you as a tank, you'll actually be able to survive through it and then press your defensive buttons and heal up and then be a nuisance well into the fight. Now, I think the stats don't really show that Luke is a problem in Korea, and they're all playing like Pen Luke or Bruiser Luke over there. So I don't know if this build is actually supposed to be really that great, but I know that it is actually great in North America because a lot of high elo players here complain about Tank Luke, and if the high elo players complain about Tank Luke, then he'll probably be impressive in low elo. So hopefully you guys will see that in your games if you do decide to play this Tank Luke variant. So for Tank Luke's route, my route is a 2-zoner, while the actual better Tank Luke player goes for a 3-zoner. The reason why I prefer this 2-zoner is because the problematic item, Sword Stopper, is only a little bit less efficient than the actual better item, Burnished Aegis, and you're replacing that item almost immediately anyways, which is the reason why I'm okay with going this build. Now, in contrast to the other builds I've brought up, this build is actually going to want to try and kill the chickens if you're allowed to in gas station, and there's going to be one spawn in particular that gives you access to those chickens, which is going to be the kind of leftmost spawn. So if you get that spawn, take the time to kill the chickens. That'll be your easiest source of leather because warehouse has very, very few leather sources outside of the bats and boars that spawn. Now bats don't spawn immediately, so you have time to loot through all of warehouse to get the 2 copies of metal you need, or the 4 copies rather. It's like 2 spawn copies is what I meant. And then if those bats aren't accessible to you, then there's always the boars you can kill as well. Now, while you're in warehouse, you want to make sure you pick up all the SP drinks you can because you want to go to the campfire in warehouse, cook all of your food, and cook all of your SP drinks because you will need SP if you go for the correct sub-augment tree, which is in purple. In purple tree, there are going to be the sub-augments called Circular System and Power Crescendo, and those 2 augments are way better for scaling than the one I took, which should be like Chem Temp for the week, which is the Execute one, and Endorphins, which is the Lazy Man's SP replacement. So you can go the Lazy Man's version, which is what I did, or you can go for the more efficient version. And if you're going for the more efficient version, you will need SP drinks no matter what. Now, going on to Luke's power spike, unlike most of the characters in the game, Tank Luke actually has a very, very important power spike you need to hit, and that's going to be your W Evo. Now, you could level your W Evo first, but Luke's Q Evo is so strong because I think it straight up doubles your Q damage if your opponent is at 40% HP or lower. So almost always you want to take that early Q Evo just for early griefing, but you also don't want to take really aggressive fights until you get that second W Evo, which means that you have to farm a lot of monsters to get that Evo, and if you don't have that Evo, you'll find yourself feeling very, very weak. In fact, if you don't have that Evo, Tank Luke is absolute garbage. So you want to make sure you have it before you take an aggressive fight on an objective or anything else. In fact, there's a chance that you might even just want to level that evolution first if your teammates want to go for an early objective, just in case you find no animals in your initial clear. So, what items does Tank Luke want to build? Tank Luke will always want to rush Solar System Miniature first. That is going to be a Force Core arm piece that's going to replace the Burnished Aegis or the Sword Stopper, which is again the reason why I was fine with going for the 2-zoner instead of Fruit's much more efficient 3-zoner. Solar System Miniature is super important for Luke because, as I keep mentioning, he wants to stay alive. Every time you press W, you will heal so much HP, and Solar System Miniature is absolutely amazing for that alone. Now, the other upgrades you want to go for are going to be Boots of Hermes, which is another Force Core item, and also Crusader Helmet, which is a Mithril headpiece, Battlesuit, which is the Meteor chest piece, and then Monkey King Bar, which is a Mithril weapon. So the Meteor chest piece Battlesuit is something that you also want very quickly, but you don't actually want to rush it because of how common meteors are in the game. If your teammates cap out meteors quickly, then you'll get that upgrade very easily. And even if you get that personal upgrade, unlike with Markus, you probably actually just want to use that meteor for yourself because of how good that particular upgrade is. Now, you generically just want to save for the Mithril or the Force Core because the Crusader helmet increase from Helmet Banneret is really good because Crusader Helmet gives you that 5% CDR increase or cap increase, which means that your W will be up that much more often and your Q will be used that much more often. And then Hermes is just a very good armor leg to use. Going into fights, you're going to want to have the same thought process as Markus, where you're allowed to go in, but you don't want to be focused too quickly. Luke, while he is very tanky as his tank build, can be burst if you don't respect the enemy's burst potential, and he can be burned down if it's you alone and there's no lockdown happening from your team. So you want to make sure that when you go in, you're going to go in, you're going to want to use your W to heal a lot, and then you have a choice. You always want to go in with Q because you want to use your E as a means of either escape or continued pressure. Your E, which is your little hop, can also be used as a ward hop, which can function as a 5-meter blink that a lot of characters just cannot chase. So with that in mind, you can use your Q and run into the enemy tank or try and snipe an enemy backliner. And if you do that, you can just take the Q and then think about blinking out with the mini cameras that you should have in your stockpile. And the reason why this works is because it'll cause the effect that I keep mentioning where your opponents will try and focus you. And since you're blinking out, they won't be able to kill you in time, which kind of lets your team follow up and kill their frontliner or even dive their backline. And the reason why you have to have this blink out option available is because, again, you are not invulnerable. You are not immortal. There are scenarios where you are functionally unkillable, but that's not every scenario. You have to set that up. And setting it up either requires you going in and making sure your team follows you up as well as you go in, or you want to make sure that you can give yourself some space and let your team follow up so that you can then re-engage and then get that immortality that you're looking for as you fight. So just make sure that you have a good sense of how much damage an enemy team can do. If they can't do enough, then stay in the fight. But if you know they can do too much, you want to make sure that the enemy team is split up and preoccupied so they can't kill you, and so you can keep generating value through your W spam. So hopefully that made sense because it is a different kind of way of playing the game than a lot of other tanks because a lot of tanks are cooldown dependent, but Luke's W is on such a low cooldown that you can just hit it over and over again, and then it should just keep you alive for a lot longer than a lot of people think you should be able to stay alive. So hopefully that makes sense. And we get to move on to our second damage dealer and fourth character on this list. So for our fourth character, we're going to talk about Emma. This is going to be Shuriken Emma, but I think Arcana Emma is just as good as well. The reason why Emma is so powerful at a base level is because the polymorph combo, which is going to be her E into her R, is just really obnoxious for anyone to deal with. It does a lot of damage because you cycle your passive into it and you get 2 passive procs with it, and you also get your skills thrown into it as well. And since you're going to be taking force field, or not force field, you're going to be taking totem as Emma, you end up using your totem, which makes you immune to anything for 2.5 seconds. So your enemy can't even catch up to you properly or even punch you properly because you're going to be inside of the totem, and then hopefully your team follows up. So Emma has a very high skill cap, so even if you do end up learning her, you should still feel rewarded because you can always do more than just the polymorph combo. The polymorph combo is just the easiest way to play her, and it is already so efficient as a baseline game plan. So Emma's route is going to be a 3-zoner. It's going to be warehouse into uptown, and then your choice between forest or beach because you're just going to one of those zones for the gemstone. Now, the most important thing you need to remember for the warehouse into uptown route is that you need to kill the chickens that are either at the top of warehouse or at the bottom of uptown. And it's really important you do that because there's no real other good sources for leather. And it's actually really easy for Emma because you can just W on top of the chickens, make sure you hit as many as you possibly can, and then you auto each one down and you'll be able to kill the chickens really quickly and then get your 2 leathers that way. Now, while you're in uptown, you want to make sure you pick up every sorts of SP drinks you can. So in Uptown, I believe it's going to be the sparkling water and the whiskey. And the reason why you don't do it in warehouse is because you're holding too many items as you walk into Uptown. You should probably drink your water as well going to Uptown because you need all the item space you can to loot quickly when you're going through Uptown because odds are people might try and take it. So once you're done building, you're going to decide between staying for the wolves in Uptown or scooting right into forest or beach. And the reason why I recommend beach personally is because I think there's a lot of griefers in forest that might want to try and kill you if you go there. But whichever one you choose, pick up the gemstone and then cook all of your food and water, and then go farm some more or group up with your team. So Emma's main power spike is going to be your level 3 maxed out passive, which means that you're going to put every point in the passive as you can, and that's going to be ending up being like a level 9 power spike for your passive. The reason why you level up your passive so quickly is because, again, it gets reset with your RE combo. So if you auto and then RE and then auto again, that's 2 rotations of your passive, which means that you get the massive shield twice, and then you also have the totem afterwards to be really resilient. And what ends up happening is that you get really, really strong single target damage because of how insane the passive is at just whacking people really, really hard. And so your second power spike is going to be the Persona purchase. Same idea as Jenny, just a really strong bump in amp. So speaking of Persona, again, that is the item you want first. It's going to be a lot of amp. It's going to be a lot of, raw power, and it's going to give your passive a lot more shielding and a lot more oomph behind it. The other items you want, you're going to grab as they come up. You will notice that this build goes for a second force core item, and that force core item actually isn't usually purchased unless you have an excess of credits. That force core item is going to be gotten from the Omega spawn. So you're going to contest Omega as a team, and then if that force core drops, that force core will most likely be yours for that dragon scale. The Earth and Fire Wheels is going to be a mythical weapon, which can be also received from the Alpha or Battle Zones, but I think that is going to be the one you prefer building if you need to buy something from the kiosk after you bought Persona. Now, the other items are all tree/meteor items, so the Cabana and the Glacial Shoes are also really strong, but odds are you'll find them from a random bear, random box, or random wolf. But if you have to purchase them, then you can. They're pretty cheap, but that will most likely be purchased at the very end of the game. And then your attack skill, personally, I would rush Totem 2 right after Persona because I think that having a 90-second CD on Totem, it feels really terrible. So I don't know how often the Emmas would agree with me, but since your game plan is going to revolve around that RE combo, you want your other part of that combo, the Totem, to be up as often as possible. So I would say Persona and attack 2 into everything else, but others might disagree. So as I keep mentioning, the way you want to approach fights as Emma is going to be through that RE combo. You don't want to do it on a tank because if you use it on a tank, you might get focused down by the ADCs, and you want to make sure you space properly to actually hit the main important carries, because if you don't use it on carries, it feels a lot less effective. Now, if you do manage to get the combo off, or you do manage to approach the range, the way you're going to want to use the combo is you're going to want to polymorph and then buffer the W and Q and auto attack at the same time. Because polymorph takes a while to hit, you have time to buffer in a lot of other spells into it and your auto attack. And again, remember that the polymorph ult combo refreshes your passive, so you must auto during it. The benefit of autoing during it also means that when you jump in, any stray projectiles flying at you as you setting up the combo get absorbed by the shield, and then you jump in, CC all of them, and anyone you don't CC, their damage is mitigated by your next auto attack, and then you have totem right afterwards. Unfortunately, the rest of the fight is going to be very freestyle. The basic of Emma is that you kind of just baseline have that strong initiation, but everything afterwards you have to play by ear. Whether that's going to be trying to land the double dove Q on people, hitting your Ws consistently, or even panic polymorphing as it comes up. It also comes down to whether or not your next ultimate is another polymorph combo, or if it's an attempt at a hat ult or a dove ult. That part's a bit more nebulous, but just remember that the way you want to start fights, unless you see a beautiful angle, which you will see as you get better at Emma, you're going to be looking for that polymorph ultimate combination to start it off. And last but not least, I want to talk about Hammer Magnus. Now, the reason why it's Hammer Magnus and not Bat Magnus is because Hammer Magnus is the one with amp scalings, and Bat Magnus, I think, goes crit, which is kind of a meme build. I don't think it's super awful, but it's pretty close to being super awful, so tank Hammer Magnus it is. So the reason why Hammer Magnus is really good is because if he gets to stack up his passive, he feels nigh unkillable. He also has the benefit of having the funny bite combo, which allows you to escape or initiate any fight you want. And also, it's really fun to just press W, walk on people, and watch them scurry away, but they can't scurry away because you've de-sharded them, and you're just chasing them down and watching yourself spin over and over again. And it's ironically very satisfying to watch. So hopefully you find that base satisfaction with that as well as you try the character out. So the route we're going to go is going to be archery range, gas station, and cemetery. You will notice this is a 4-leather build, and don't fret too much because the way that the archery range and the gas station routing works is that unless you spawn on the far side of archery range and there's people contesting you, you can always run to the gas station adjacent spawn and then force route through gas station where you can go into the bottom or the archery range hugging spawn. And then that area not only has a very nice loot distribution for you, it also has a bunch of chickens for you to kill. And then when you teleport into cemetery, people usually don't kill the cemetery chickens that often, so you can collect those as well, and you'll solve your leather problem really quickly. So with that said, the power spike for Magnus is going to be when your passive is maxed. Your passive is going to be a percentage defense scaling that you'll find to be very efficient. Unfortunately, it only now stacks when you hit people, but that's what your W is for. Ideally, you'll have your W max as well. You take a fight, but your passive is going to be the most important aspect of your kit because you'll be always running Diamond Shard, which is a flat increase to your defense, and then that will only get magnified by your passive as you W on top of people. So I guess we're jumping ahead a little bit, but the idea is that you're going to hit your bike, mash your E on somebody to proc Diamond Shard, hit W, and then watch your defense climb to like 400, 500 for fun. So going over his main items, Magnus's builds are fairly cheap overall. I think the very first item you want is going to be Blazing Dress just because it's one, a very cheap upgrade, but also it just really helps out the way Magnus wants to play, which is to get on top of somebody and then stay on top of them. So the aura of Blazing Dress, while a little bit on the weak end, is really efficient on Magnus because it's just adding way more damage on top of what your game plan already is. Now, this Magnus build will have triple Force Core as its follow-up. The priority in my head is always going to be Solar System Miniature because that's the best burst of HP you can have in the middle of a fight. And that's going to be Bunny Hat because Bunny Hat's consistency with Magnus, every time you E, you'll get the Bunny Hat pop. The reason why I have Solar System at a higher priority is just because Magnus's only form of crowd control is his E, so you'll always already be in melee when you get your first Bunny Hat proc, so the short-term value of Solar System Miniature is going to be way higher, but in a very long fight, Bunny Hat will start to exceed it. The odds that the fight's going to be long, though, are usually really low, but it does happen. And then you're going to get the Boosted Hermes as your last Force Core upgrade, and then your Magic Stick will be upgraded whenever you find an extra meteor that your team doesn't need. So the way you want to approach fights as Magnus is that you want to be the person that jumps them. The issue with Magnus is that his passive only works when you hit somebody, and the only way you can stack it fast is if you use your W. So that means that if you just do a very fair fight where you walk up to the enemy team in vision, and then you walk up to the tank and hit W, you will die so fast because you have so little defense stacked up and you've let the enemy team see your approach and then have a fair fight. You want to either jump enemy teams from the bush or run them with bike, but you don't want to run them with bike from far enough that your teammates cannot initiate. Magnus's problem is that he needs time. Once he has his passive fully stacked, he feels nigh immortal, but until you get to his passive stacks, he can be killed quite easily. So you want to make sure that when you bike, it's within a range that your team can be with you. And then once you do bike, you want to go for the squishies and make sure that they're staring right at you after your W has gone on for a while. And then as your W goes on, your D shard will be ticking. And then when your D shard pops, that'll continue to allow your W to stay on top of them. Your Q is almost always going to be a poke tool, But once your W ends, you'll have some time to use your E and Q again, and then hopefully you were hitting 1 or 2 people the entire time, so your W comes back up, and you want to just make sure your W uptime is as high as possible, especially since it gives you a massive tenacity buff while it's active, and that means that if somebody tries to stun you, the stun will be really short. If they try and fear you, you'll like come right back at them, and everything besides a knock up, you'll be able to shrug off very easily. The main issue with Magnus, again, is that if you get caught before your passive is stacked all the way, you are made of paper. You need that passive. That is by far the most important thing you need to know as approaching a fight with Magnus. If you can't see a good fight start, just walk away and then choose to fight on your own terms. Obviously, final zone's a thing, but that's where flanks can happen, and you just have to figure that out as you get there. Again, very good tank fundamental of knowing how to engage because you'll feel it the most as Magnus. Bad engage, pop instantly. Good engage, be immortal. So yeah, those are gonna be the 5 characters I wanted to cover. I think this video went a bit longer than I wanted to, but I did want to do a lot of coverage for all the characters I brought up. I didn't want to just say that these characters are good and then leave you guys out to dry. So hopefully the effort was appreciated. Hopefully the video was helpful for you guys. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye bye.